And welcome back to the Patrick Reagan Show, your beacon of light here on the Libertarian Lighthouse Radio Network and News Talk 98.7 WLKI. Coming at you from way down, nestled into the bowels of this station today. I believe after all my remarks about the NSA and everything, the station has moved me to a more safer studio. The real reason we're moved is because UT's playing today, and of course, sports is more important than me. So
we needed to move you to a secure location.
That's what it is. See, I was trying to, let people really know why I'm here. I used to have a window, and now I'm just closed up in this little room, and Jay is somewhere over in, like, Texas or Florida or something. I don't even know where he is in this building, but he's way far away from me.
And you won't know.
Yeah, I think that's part of the security system.
That's right.
There was like a retina scanner I had to use to get in here, and they just secured me way down in the basement of the station. Either that or they're telling me something about my show. I'm not real sure. All right. This week, yes, to answer the question everyone has been asking me all week, I'm going to talk about Syria. Patrick, when are you going to talk about Syria? What do you think about Syria? What should we do about this whole Syrian thing? Hey, did you hear there's Labor Day sale at Old Navy? So, yes, we're going to talk a little bit about that. Not the sale at Old Navy. We're going to talk about the Syrian situation. This is why they're sticking me down in a hole right here. I've addressed this Syrian question many times throughout the past year, but since things seem to be ramping up, let's hit it again and see what we can come up with. First off, we aren't sure who is using chemical weapons. Before you start screaming at the radio, think about this from a logical and reasoned point of view. I know that's asking a lot from liberals and conservatives and politicians. Almost by definition, they all act in a political way, not a logical and reasoned way. They don't try to do what's best for the country. They put themselves and their party ahead of everything. Heck, these politicians even put their interests before us, their employers, the citizens of this country. I like to point that out every chance I get, just to make sure it soaks into your brain good and deep. These people work for us. We send them to government as our representative. We don't have time to go and vote on things, so we send someone in our place. We're all out here trying to make a buck, working a real job. So in order to make sure what are supposed to be routine decisions in the running of our country, we elect people to take care of that. If something rises to the level of our Constitution, then the people we send to Washington are supposed to put together an amendment and offer it to us to vote on. But most of what the government does nowadays is not allowed by the United States Constitution, nor most, if not all, state constitutions. Unfortunately, a whole lot of us citizens out here aren't paying attention to what's going on, and so our government is pretty much doing whatever it wants to do with no regards to whether it is allowed or not. They decide they want to do something and look for a way around the Constitution to do it. If it's ever called into question, all they need to have is a court somewhere in this country to rule in their favor, and they'll keep trying till they get it. You see, you're paying for them to do that. It's your tax dollars defending the government, or I was going to say country, but the tax dollars are defending the government and whatever it's doing outside the Constitution. If it loses, then, it'll just raise your taxes to make up for the money it lost fighting that court battle. It's kind of like heads you win, tails you lose, or heads it wins, tails you lose. I'm sorry, though. I'm getting off track. I know that's hard to believe, but sometimes it does happen, even on this show. But back to chemical weapons and looking at it from a logical and reasoned point of view, not a hysterical and emotional one. That's something you won't hear on this show, the hysterical, emotional arguments, that is. So looking at this Syrian situation from a logical point of view, who has the most to gain by pulling us into this civil war? Let's say you're fighting against the government in Syria and you're starting to lose the war. Now, you watch international television. You have reporters from all over the world covering what's happening in that country, so you have access to information. You know that Bashar Assad, the leader of Syria, has been warned about using chemical weapons. And you also know that the President of the United States has said his country is going to make military strikes against the Syrian leaders if they engage in the use of chemical weapons. Now, U.S. Navy ships are even sitting off his coast. Heck, the CIA is already supplying these people with weapons and advisors. And everyone in this country, at least, and I suspect around the world, knows we're supplying the alleged rebel fighters with arms and support. So our government has already picked a side. We aren't supplying the Syrian government with military aid, only their opposition. Therefore, we are siding with the ones we are helping, are we not? So we've established that the United States has already picked a side in this war. It isn't a disinterested, neutral third party. It clearly wants one side to prevail. Now, the people fighting the Syrian government aren't stupid. They can see this too. I mean, I'm smart, but it doesn't take a genius to look at this situation and see we've picked a side. So now the United States backside, the United States backed side, I hesitate to call them rebel fighters. They aren't really rebelling. They're just another faction fighting for control of the country, and we've decided to back them. So why are we doing this? Because Russia is backing Assad and his government. You see, Russia has naval bases in Syria, and they'd like to keep a friendly government in charge. The Russians are already having problems with the Muslims in parts of their own country wanting freedom and independence. They don't want to deal with them in Syria around their naval bases as well. So Russia is backing one side, the government, while we are backing the other side, the so-called rebels. Now, is all this starting to sound a little familiar? Maybe like Korea or Vietnam? Or if you want an almost textbook example, Iran. If you remember history, it's the Cold War all over again. I covered the CIA-backed coup in Iran last week. If you want to listen to that, just pop over to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Patrick Riggins Show. You'll find all the archives there. Just look for last week's show. So we have a red line, though, that was drawn by our president stating that if chemical weapons were used in Syria, that the United States would intervene. So which side has the most to gain from all this? Is it the Syrian government side? Do they want to provoke a major world power into the war? Do they want to battle the lone superpower on the planet? What would be the purpose? So they can lose a war they're starting to win? So if not them, who has the most to gain? Well, of course, it's the faction we're backing. If they start losing the war, is it not worth it to try and draw the United States in on its side? We've already established that our country has picked their side to back. All we are doing right now is waiting for a reason to help out even more. A justification we can use to start launching missiles and providing overt military assistance. So the side with the most to gain by using chemical weapons is the side we're backing. They aren't going to be blamed for using them. The Syrian government is. Everyone is going to be pointing fingers at the Syrian government. So the question is, how many Syrian lives are worth losing to bring in the United States? Now, as I just mentioned, we've sacrificed people before, namely, like I mentioned, in Iran. General Norman Schwarzkopf Sr. was instrumental in training covert forces in 1953 to help overthrow the democratically elected Iranian leader, Mohammad Mossadegh. Now, if you want to know more about this, there's an extensive Wikipedia entry. If you go to that and search for 1953 Iran coup d'etat, if you read through the whole history and what we were doing in that country, you'll find the similarities eerily familiar to the present day. If you're on our Facebook and have liked our page on there, we're also going to put the link on there this afternoon after the show's over. You can also click that little like button, but don't worry, we don't flood your timeline with posts every hour or so. I hate that, and I know most of you don't like it either. So we only post stuff that's relevant to the show that week. So, yeah, if you search for that, though, 1953 Iran coup d'etat, it's not exactly the same as Syria, but it's pretty close. We weren't advocating the outright military assistance, but everything else is pretty similar in that. This is all about trying to install a U.S.-friendly regime in Syria. And we want it. The Israelis sure want it. But fortunately, a lot of people in this world don't want anything to do with that civil war. They're willing to let the Syrian people fight it out and decide who is going to be in charge. Yes, people are going to get killed. Women and children are going to die. That's what happens in war. But our Constitution doesn't mention anything about spreading democracy and getting involved in civil wars or trying to pick the leaders of other countries. As we've been seeing over the past 100 years or so, though, our government doesn't seem real interested in the rules laid out in that document. And if we don't stand up and start doing something about it, this government behavior is only going to get worse over time, just as it has over the last century. We're going to have more intervention, more killing, more trampling of people's natural human rights. Yes, even ours here in this country. Rights protected by the Constitution, but ignored by our own government. And anyone standing up to the government, Edward Snowden, will be punished. As a citizen of this country, you need to work, pay your taxes, and not question authority. That's what they want. But back to my original question, though, how many people are worth sacrificing to bring the U.S. into the Syrian civil war? Is our government behind it, or is it at least giving tacit approval to this kind of thing? You may say, oh, Patrick, you're exaggerating. Our country would never condone the killing of innocent people just to get us involved in a war. Well, yes, it would. And they'll even do it by killing Americans if that's what it takes. I'll have that story and even more during the second half hour of the Patrick Reagan Show here on the Libertarian Lighthouse Radio Network when we come back, and News Talk 98.7 WOKI. I said, when we come back after the half-hour break, we'll have that story and even more to cram in here. I don't think we'll get to it all, but we'll sure try when we come back.